The 32nd season of The Ultimate Fighter is right here. And for our troubles, we decided to preview it ahead. O'Neill, Theo Lander, in your ears. We're going to break down this season. We're going to break down, obviously, the two coaches, Alexa Grasso, Valentina Shevchenko, will kind of round out the trilogy of their fights. You would imagine a little bit later on this year. They are the coaches. They are the focus of attention this year. But we also have some featherweights. We also have some middleweights in this season's TUF. 32 seasons. It's a love-hate relationship with the Ultimate Fighter for me, Theo. I watched it every single episode up until around the early 20s and kind of teetered out. But we do have the extra excitement of that Irish interest in this season's Ultimate Fighter. Paddy McCorry, obviously Omran Chaaban, Paddy McCorry fighting out with FAI Ireland. Paddy, a good middleweight prospect coming up with a good chance here in this tournament. Omran Chaaban obviously fighting in the middleweight division, and natural welterweight too from Team KF. Obviously, we have some Johnny Bakar, we have Nathan Fletcher from Cage Warriors as well. A couple of familiar faces in here this year as well. But first, before we break in and have a look at all of the fighters, Theo, what do you think of where are you at with the Ultimate Fighter? Where are you at with that relationship? I think a lot of people kind of hate watch TUF around this time. It was the folklore of the Ultimate Fighting Championships for quite some time. Lots of champions coming through and being very successful off the show, which someone that's kind of took a backward step with the emergence of Dana White's Contender Series. Really, that's taken kind of a more prominent focus within the UFC right now. But nonetheless, we're here. The season kicks off tonight, and I'm ready for it. Are you?
Yeah, well, I mean, like you said, it is absolutely a love-hate relationship with this show. I mean, I think it is just kind of a bit outdated, especially around these last couple of years now where the sport has grown so much. Like back in the day, there weren't as many fighters out there. The pool wasn't as big and there weren't as many promotions to go to. So when the UFC rang you and said, "Hey, do you want to join this reality show for a couple of weeks and live in this house and, fight in this tournament?" It was like almost the only opportunity that a lot of these guys had. And a lot of these guys, since they were a smaller pool of fighters, ended up going to have great success. And nowadays you see guys who maybe get the offer to go through the TUF House. I know Paul Hughes famously had an offer to go there. Obviously, if you're a guy like Paul Hughes, this is not worth the risk at all to go through. A lot of other guys at his caliber, I'm sure, have had the similar opportunity they said no to. But yeah, it just feels like over the years, there's not been a lot of innovation with this season, or the series, I should say. That there hasn't been like a lot of changes between even like the B-roll that they show is predictable and they have the same pattern to every single episode and it's just on and on and on. And they even tried last year to inject something new into it with the McGregor Chandler season. I really tried to sit down and enjoy that and I just couldn't. I every year I do the
There
same
wasn't
thing.
even really anything that new last year. Only the fact that you
No.
had that extra interest. Like I hadn't watched it like last year for quite some time. Like I missed out on a good few seasons of it because it's just like you said, it was the same old thing, rinse and repeat, and the quality of the product had kind of just been watered down to a level where you just didn't really have the interest or the time to kind of consume. And modern mixed martial arts, man, we've so much content to look at and so much content and fight night cards and stuff like that to keep up with. It's hard to like throw this in the mix on a Tuesday night as well. But even with me with McGregor, I tuned in. Episode 1, I was like, my goodness, they've not changed this at all, and they were reintroducing it as well. And I'm not expecting anything different this year, that being said, but I am glad to have that little bit of interest with a couple of familiar faces in there at very least to kind of to whet our appetite.
Yeah, and I think that is like the main thing. Nothing has changed. And in the sport where, like you said, we have so many options to watch stuff on the weekend. There's so much MMA to keep up with now. It's hard to ask the fans to commit their time and, commit their fandom to these guys who we know are lower level, who we know probably won't have the same opportunities to go win world championships as some of these other guys. So it's a tough ask on the fans, and I'm a bit surprised at the lack of innovation at this point. But, here we are. I think we do have a good crop of fighters this year. I think we have some standout guys, a couple All-American D1 wrestlers, a couple Sambo world champions, a couple amateur world champions. We've got it all in this one, and I'm kind of excited to see how it plays out.
Well, let's get into it. Featherweights and middleweights are on top this year. Let's start with the featherweights, and let's start with Edwin Cooper Jr. Theo, a guy 7-1, 31 years of age, fighting out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. When you're looking at this guy, what are some of the hit points that you've seen looking back at some of his fights, and do you think that this guy may be a player in the featherweight division this year?
Maybe not in the actual division of the UFC, but at least in
Oh no,
this
no, I mean,
tournament.
yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, of
Yeah,
course. So, I mean, Edwin Cooper is a guy who has a strong wrestling background. He was a Division two NCAA national finalist, which does mean quite a bit, even though it is Division two. If you make it to the finals of that tournament, it means a lot. And then we've seen a lot of guys transfer over to MMA with a lot of success after that. He is, of course, given that background, a little bit underdeveloped with the striking, but he has learned to sort of use a good 1-2 to set up his takedowns, and I feel like he's gotten a lot better at that. And the more well-rounded his game becomes, the more dangerous he is. At this point, I don't know how good his striking just is. I guess we're going to find out a lot on this season, but that's the main thing to look out for is how well can he get his game rounded out on the feet. He is a sort of smothering grappler. He doesn't really try to go for the submission as much as he tries to maintain position and ride guys out, which I think is going to be something to look out for because a lot of these guys in the house, I don't think have convinced a lot of people they have great cardio. So Edwin Cooper is a
yeah.
guy who could grind a lot of people out here.
Yeah, absolutely. And cardio is obviously a big thing in the Ultimate Fighter household because you're forced to make weight on a consistent basis as well. Obviously, the whole season itself is spread out over 10 weeks for us, but I think it plays out over the course of 4 to 6 weeks in the actual house itself. So you're maintaining your weight. Obviously, if you remain in the tournament, you've got to keep that weight down, and those constant weight cuts they definitely do play havoc, as we've seen in other seasons as well, with guys not trying to make weight and stuff like that. We moved to Nathan Fletcher in the featherweight division. A guy we're super familiar with, coming from Cage Warriors, obviously 8-1, 26 years of age, fighting out of Liverpool, England, of course, and Next Gen as well. Big submission threat, good cardio, and a guy that I'm looking forward to seeing how he competes against some of the American talent in this and how he can match up with them. What do you think of him as a fighter, Theo, and how do you think he may match up with this bracket?
Yeah, in my opinion, Nate Fletcher's the best guy in this house, regardless of weight class either. I think he's, pound for pound wise, better than the best middleweight would be in their respective competition in this season. Nate Fletcher, I think, is a guy who we've all known as like the consensus, like either top one or two bantamweight prospect in Europe for a while now. I'm honestly kind of surprised he's even in the TUF house here. Like it feels like a bit of a risk for him to come in this way, but well-rounded game. I see him competing with anyone in this house, no matter where any of these fights go. I don't think he's like the clear-cut number one. He's not going to have any problems here. I think there's a lot of tough matchups for him, no doubt. But I do think that if I had to put a bet on it, he would be the guy to come out top of the season.
Very, very interesting that you say that. Obviously, we saw him in there against Dominic Wooden, challenging for the Cage Warriors featherweight champion. Didn't go his way that time, but came back. I spoke to him actually ahead of that fight myself, and very cool, calm, and composed for a young fighter, even at that stage. That was a couple of years ago now. Only 26 years of age, coming in off 2 wins here in Cage Warriors. Last being a triangle choke, a first round win for him, and coming in with a lot of hype. And very interesting to see that to hear you say that he is definitely one of your favorites in the house as well. And I'm sure that it'll be interesting to see how he does compete in there. I think he has a damn good chance as well, given the rest of the competition in the featherweight bracket as well. Moving on down, Theo. This is a mouthful. Zigimantias Ramiska, a Lithuanian fighter, 9-2, coming in here to the Ultimate Fighter household, bringing that European level talent into the household of over in Las Vegas as well. What do you think of this guy?
Yeah, this guy, Mr. Ramaska, so I'll refer to him as.
Yeah, I should have done the same.
Yeah, this guy is a downhill brawler. He is chaos inside the cage, especially when he smells blood in the water and he realizes he's got his guy hurt. He will march forward, charge you down, and he's willing to take shots on the way in. He gets a little bit too reckless when he feels like he's got the finish looming, which I think is a bit of a problem for him. But look, this guy is, someone who has a background in judo, combat sambo world champion as well at 71 kilograms back in 2021. So this is a guy who you're convinced can do well on the ground, can get you there if he wants, but he's also rounded out his game really well with the strikes. He's a powerful striker. I think maybe sometimes when you have guys who are these great grapplers, they're not too afraid of going to the ground, especially on their back, and that can be sometimes their demise. I've seen Ramoska a couple times accept back position, a few times too many that he should. But regardless, I think this guy is super powerful, super dangerous, can finish you anywhere the fight goes. You know, I honestly think mentally is where he has to sort of round out his game here and just sort of relax at times and not get too deep into waters when he doesn't have to put himself there. But this is a dangerous guy, no doubt.
You mean he brings a style in to me that suits the Ultimate Fighter household, and a guy, who goes out there, looks for the finish as well. You want to go out there, get your guys out there, take as little damage as possible. But like you said, he does get caught into a brawl every now and again, and that can lead to trouble as well. Also, the style of fight for him, he has not been past round 2 all that much. He's never seen a round 3 as far as I could see, maybe on the regional scene, but that doesn't show up on his record. But obviously we're talking about 2 5-minute rounds here with the potential of a third one if it is a draw too, of course. But this guy likes to come out. I'd expect, it'd be interesting to see how he gets matched up, who he gets matched up with, but a finisher here nonetheless. Moving down to Roddy Royce, 7-1, 27 years of age, fighting out of South Africa. What do you make of this guy, Theo?
It's hard to know what to make of Roddy here because he doesn't really have the strongest competition on his record here, nor does he have the experience. He's a relatively unexperienced guy. He's only got 8 fights here, 7-1, and he's also coming off of a pretty long layoff as well. And before that layoff, we were pretty convinced of his grappling abilities, like many of the counterparts in this house. We're going to say that about here, but we weren't so sure if he's run out of striking. Maybe he has done so in the time off. Perhaps he's put the hands together a little bit, but there's just too much or too many question marks around this guy for me to give an accurate assessment of him. We're really going to learn a lot about everyone in this house, but I think we're going to learn the most about Roddy here.
Roddy is coming in here as a IMAF world champion, and I mean that he won the world championships in 2016 in the lightweight division. I think that would tell you that he has got a good bit of potential coming in here. Obviously, this is in featherweight. He's got coming down in weight a little bit as well. Also, kind of fought at EFC. That's a prominent African promotion too. Coming in off the back of 2 wins, 2 finishes, by one by rear naked choke in round 1 and by verbal submission, I should say, after strikes in round 2 against August Kambiala. A little bit of a layoff, but he did fight in May of last year. Maybe had an inkling that he was getting this chance as well and might have just been saving himself for the tournament. But I think credentials wise, he's got some good credentials. He's got some tough matchups in EFC as well. You don't really get too many easy fights there. So definitely a guy that I would be looking out towards in the featherweight division. Roddy Royce, 7-1, coming in here in the featherweight division. Over to the Tajikistan. Beksod Usmanov. This guy is going to be a firecracker because he's from Tajikistan. To be honest, those guys are absolutely crazy. They love to set a ferocious pace. But what do you think of him as an overall threat in this bracket and as a fighter himself?
You use the word crazy. I'll go a step further. This guy is batshit insane. He's actually the only guy in the history of the Ultimate Fighter to come into the house with experience fighting in BKFC. This guy's a bare knuckle brawler. Anyone who was willing to do that stuff, my hat's off to you. You're absolutely insane.
Take the gloves off and fight like a take the gloves off and fight like a man. What is the state?
Take your gloves off and fight like, or I don't even know what he says anymore.
Fight like a man, bitch, or something like that.
Yeah, who cares? Anyways, this guy, Vexod, he's super powerful with the hands, especially when he gets close in the pocket. He sort of has a tendency to sort of go people into firefights with him, which, if you looked at the couple guys that we've talked about earlier here, there's a potential for some really exciting matchups here. This guy has the ability to end the fight whenever you're standing with him, power in both hands. And he has a softball background, but it doesn't seem to have translated too well to MMA thus far for him. Just based on what I've seen here, I would expect someone with that much of a background in combat sambo to be a little bit more dominant in that area. But for whatever reason, it just doesn't seem like it's working for him in his current fight style. Maybe that's something that changes, but as for right now, I think he's a guy who's maybe started out as a grappler but fell in love with his hands, and he's got quite the hands to fall in love with here, Ian.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming out of Jackson Wing Camp, obviously, as well in Albuquerque, New Mexico, solid camp there as well. So, looks like a fairly well-rounded guy, and I think this guy might be one guy to look out for in the featherweight bracket as well. Be interesting to see, obviously, how he gets matched up. Couple of more to talk about in the featherweight division. Guillermo Torres fighting out of Mexico, 7-1. Very, very old entrant into the Ultimate Fighter household, 37 years of age, former Olympic wrestler. Theo, what do you think of this guy?
Former Olympic wrestler, as in he was when I was in the 5th grade.
Yeah, but come on, man, you can't take it. You're harsh. You're
not
coming
going
for
to take
blood
that
here.
away from him. I just want to put that in perspective for everybody.
These guys
This guy,
catching strays left, right, and center.
no,
Theo's out for blood.
not a stray. I want all due respect to Mr. Torres here. If he finds me, he could take me down and pound my face in.
You want to
Everyone
fucking
knows
ankle
this.
pick you like Islam Hadjed, man.
But anyways, I bring that up to tell you that people who have wrestling backgrounds, they go through very grueling training. We talked to Daniel Cormier a few years ago as well about this. He said the thing that didn't take a toll on him through his fight career were the actual fights or even the sparring. It was preparing for 5 rounds on the heels of having an extensive amateur wrestling career. These wrestlers, man, they are grinding in that room, grappling every day like that, and just absolutely smashing people into the ground on the mats takes a massive toll on your body. So that's the only reason why I'm bringing that up with Torres here, is because I think you should take that more as a sign of this guy might not be as fresh as some other people here who are as young as 23, 24, 25, 26. Like, he's coming up against guys who are much fresher here. And so an older guy who's had a
Also
lot
has
of
the experience advantage too, though. That experience can go a long way as well, but you're not totally convinced.
No, he's only 7-1 in mixed martial arts though. So high level mixed martial arts competition, I would say he's rather unexperienced.
Mm-hmm.
However, in combat sports, of course he does have that.
Yeah.
At the Olympics, if you can lock in for the Olympics, I'm convinced you could lock in for any fight in your life. So, I'd be interested to see what he does here. Even if he were to go deep in this season, I think just because the age is a factor here, I'm not sure if the UFC would still sign him, but he does look to be a guy who can set up for some fun fights here.
Yeah, it's likely you're looking at a guy like this. He's going to have to go out and win it if he wants to get a crack in the UFC, I would imagine. But look, an Olympic wrestling style is one that has suited a lot of former Ultimate Fighter winners as well. Getting a fight down, putting a guy on his back, dominating 2 rounds, has been the kind of blueprint for a lot of former winners of the Ultimate Fighter as well. Can Ulfi is the next guy we're going to talk about. Wide range. We're going worldwide with this Ultimate Fighter season 32 season this year, with a multitude of countries being represented. Ulfi coming over from Australia, 11-2-1 record. What do you think of his chances?
I actually really like him as a dark horse here. He might not be the sexiest name on this list, but he is going to surprise a lot of people here. And I think in main part that is due to his iron chin. There's been a lot of situations here where it looks like he's about out in a fight, but his ability to take a shot is what gives him the opportunity to stick around. And maybe when these guys are tired after sort of blowing their load, trying to get him out of there, is when he can get them into tricky grappling situations. That this guy is he's definitely more of a grappler than a striker. That's the way I'll say it. But when he's able to get people to the ground, that's really what his world begins. He's on an 8-fight win streak here. Not a powerful puncher. He's pretty low output on the feet, but if he can get you to the ground, you are trapped in a web, and that is where he's going to shine. So I'd be looking out for him maybe to be going down early in a fight and then pull off a crazy submission towards the end. I could see something like that happening for him. But I think his ability to win in the house is going to be reliant on getting finishes off of his back.
Yeah, indeed. Very, very interesting there as well. And, not easy this day and age to get finishes off your back either, Theo. Last in the featherweight bracket, Marion Santos, 23 years of age, carrying a record of 13-1 coming into the Ultimate Fighter household. I think this guy might be up there with one of the guys to beat in this bracket, if I'm being honest. Only lost in his mixed martial arts career to Dan Argueta, who's now in the UFC. Coming in with 7 wins by knockout, 6 wins by decision, and a dangerous fighter even at his young age, with lots of experience given the fact that he's only 23, Theo.
Yeah, and that Dan Argueta loss is something that I do want to highlight here because Dan won that fight in large part, mostly due to his grappling. This guy Santos here, he's a dangerous striker. He's a powerful leg kicker. He can really do it all. He can mix up really well on the feet. But his only loss to Argueta there was just due to some massive holes in his wrestling, which I think is a massive footnote here because we're only halfway through this preview here. We've already talked about almost all of them are great wrestlers. So matchup wise, he could have some problems here. However, if in the time off, he surprised us and he's really improved that part of his game, I think this guy is going to be a problem, especially in the first beginning parts of the round when they start on the feet. So very dangerous guy, just very lacking in the grappling. I think that could lead to his downfall this year.
100%. So all in all, we looked at all the competition in the featherweight bracket. You're thinking, given off what you're saying, you're looking at Fletcher and maybe we're looking at Santos that we spoke about last as being the 2 standout guys in that bracket.
I'd say so. I'd also give a nod to our friend Mr. Ramaska here as well, just because I think that he does have a style that would be great for the house. You're right, and I think he's going to overwhelm a lot of people. I think an underrated thing, especially in lower levels of MMA, and not to say this is low level, but it's lower than the top level, we should say, is that a lot of fighters can sort of make up for where they are lacking in skill level by just overwhelming other fighters. If you look at, especially like on the regional level, like how many times you see a fighter who just comes forward and backs a guy against the cage who doesn't have his pretty striking, but he just drowns him in there. So that's why I think our friend here.
But also you're fighting in a small cage here as
also,
well.
the small cage is another big one. So I want to see Ramaska in that small cage just wreaking havoc. So those are my guys I'm thinking are going to have a great year.
You're out for blood. Let's move on to the middleweight division. Let's start with the Lebanese guerrilla, Omran Chaaban, obviously fighting out with Team KF. Coming in here, 23 years of age, 6-1 record, and coming in full of confidence. A guy that oozes confidence, and he deserves to ooze confidence because he's a very well-rounded fighter, very tricky on the feet, uses his length and reach very well. Has a sense of grappling about him too. We've seen that in his last fight when he took out Wasim Mahami at UAE Warriors, picking up the title there with a 5th round arm triangle choke. And, a guy who's been building and likes to finish too, Theo, as well. In his last 5 fights, all of them have been by finishes, some on the feet, some in the grappling, showing his ultimate well-roundedness. Coming in here in a good vein of form, constantly getting better, and I'm super excited to see how he matches up here. Now, most of his fights have been at welterweight. He is making the jump up to middleweight here, so I guess the worry is he going to be outsized in certain stages? He won't have to worry too much about cutting weight, which is going to be benefit to him. But what do you think of Omran Chaaban? A pretty decent fighter, hey?
He is. He's very fun to watch. I wrote down he has a very aesthetically pleasing striking style, very long guy. A Team KF fighter who's got a long style that's aesthetically pleasing to watch, who's also very confident as he should be. Are we talking about Omran Chaaban? Are we talking about Ian Gary here, O'Neill? I'm not sure. But regardless.
Touchy subject here.
Touchy subject. Anyways. Almost forgot about that whole thing. So I honestly, I think Omran honestly is a guy who, you're right, he is moving up to middleweight here, which is a big question mark on him. But like I said, he's long. He's not going to have a problem with the range here. I don't think going up to middleweight. I think he's going to fit right in that area. So I don't think that'll affect too much of his game here. But again, a lot of grapplers in the house. Obviously, that could be a problem for you, especially if you're moving up in weight. So I'm really interested to see how this plays out. But he is a fun guy to watch. I'm excited to do that.
Very, very excited to see what Omran has in there, and delighted for him to get the opportunity to. A guy, one way or another, that I feel is destined for the UFC, whether it happens for him in the tournament. Hopefully he gets the chance one way or another coming out of this as well. Moving on in the middleweight division, Shamid Khan Magomedov coming in here at 8-1, 29 years of age, fighting out Russia, former LFA champion. Theo, what do you think of this guy and his chances in the bracket?
Yeah, I mean, well, anytime that you're able to win a belt in an organization that's as prestigious as LFA, I think it serves well for your purposes just to compete well in a tournament that's at the level of tough, especially this season. Again, we got another heavy grappler here, a guy who likes to get to dominant positions. Hasn't really shown an ability to maintain position as well as I would want for a guy who fights at his style. Like I've seen a lot of guys who are much lesser grapplers sort of reverse position when he is sort of on top. Like if I can remember correctly, there was actually a mounted position that he completely got reversed out of here, which is sort of concerning for a guy at that fight style, like I was saying. So, I'm not sure if this guy is going to go all the way, but he could give guys problems, given the right matchups. Like this guy is a perfect example of a tough matchup for Shaban there. But if you
No
go
pun
later,
intended.
no pun intended, yeah. So if you go later in the house, I think you might find out that he's really lacking in the striking area in the
Yeah.
actually in the middle in the scrambling game as well. But this is a guy who I think will weed out a lot of people who are underdeveloped in the second half of their game. But yeah, he should be all right to watch here.
Yeah, interesting enough to see a lot of early finishes as well. Likes to get guys down, whether it's TKOs or submissions. It's kind of pick your poison with Magomedov coming in here as well. Robert Valentin is the next guy we're going to talk about, fighting out of Switzerland, 10-3 record as well, coming in here to the TUF household. What do you give his chances in the bracket here, Theo?
His three losses are against guys who were able to out-grapple him as well, which is sort of becoming a running theme here with this preview show, Ian. But he's got a great top game, so I don't think this is a guy who's necessarily worried about the takedown, which I think is sort of one of the issues that may often lead to his demise, because he's good at reversing position and getting on top and then doing great work from there. But outside of that, he's not much of a threat on the feet. He doesn't really possess an ability to affect the fight on the feet in that sense. But, he's a guy who can do a lot of great work when he's on top on the ground. He does have a tendency to get sort of dominated by more superior wrestlers. So it's a tough crop of fighters for him in this season, although I could see him having success in maybe some surprising ways.
Yeah, somewhat of a submission specialist with 6 of his wins coming by way of submission, 3 knockout wins as well. A guy that likes to get the fight down, like you said as well, and likes to finish it there, either TKO or submission, whatever finds his way. So a couple of stylistically favorable matchups for him might do him some favors, but it'll be interesting to see how he does it. Another South African competing in the middleweight division, Mark Hulme, 29, 12-3 record, fighting out of Johannesburg as well. Not great on the feet again. We're kind of hitting the trend here. Guys that are predominantly grapplers in this kind of tournament here as well. And this is another guy that would be probably known as primarily a grappler as well in Hulme.
He is, but at least he stays dynamic in the fact that he is a big submission threat. I think honestly that opens up other parts of his game. He does use ground and pound very well, but I don't believe that he does it in a way where he's actually trying to inflict a ton of damage. I think honestly the best parts of it is when his ground and pound opens up other opportunities for submissions there, and then from there he gets to awesome positions and he's able to finish the fight most of the time. This is a guy you absolutely want to keep standing because on the feet, he is well behind most of these guys. And I don't believe he actually is that great with the takedowns. He does have to sort of struggle at times to get them against lower competition. And he has also gassed out relatively quick into fights when you're sort of hoping for him to be a bit more fresh later in. So this could be an interesting season for him. Like you mentioned earlier, got to make weight a couple of times here. Got to fight on short notice, basically turning around every once in a while to fight these guys. But yeah, if he can get submissions off of his back, I think it's going to be a great time for him in the house. If not, it might not be the best.
Indeed. Moving on, we're fighting out of Sacramento, California. Ryan Loader, 6-1, coming in here. Keeping up with the team here. We got a decent wrestler coming in here, NCAA Division 1 All-American, no less. And we've had a couple of those guys who've come in and done some serious damage in previous Ultimate Fighter seasons. What do you make of Loader's chances in this one, Theo?
Yeah, fighting out of Sacramento, Team Alpha Male product as well. Like you said, D1 All American. It's the highest honor you can get in NCAA wrestling, as far as I'm concerned. So we know what this guy is about. He does look noticeably uncomfortable on the feet, which He's at 31 at this stage in his career. He's been training MMA for a solid couple of years after graduating from university. So you would kind of hope at this point that he looks a bit more settled on his feet. Unfortunately, I don't think that's the case. And I think that if anyone's able to keep him up off the mat, then he's going to have a tough time. However, in the transitionary spaces, when he's going for the takedown, if he has to chain his wrestling together to actually get them to the ground, I think he's excellent there. So I don't think there's many guys in the house that can stop his takedowns. I think there's guys in the house that can get up from under him, no problem. But getting them to the ground, Ryan Loder's excellent at that. And I think he's going to have a lot of success there. Will that translate to winning fights in the house? I'm not exactly too sure of, but we're going to have to wait and see because there's a lot of guys with unique holes in their game here, especially in the middleweight division of this cast. So I'm interested to see how that plays out.
Yeah, lots of intangibles as well, of course, making weight and how your previous fight goes and stuff like that as well. All of those factors definitely take into account when you need a somewhat of a little bit of luck in the Ultimate Fighter household, I feel. On to Johnny Backer, Cage Warriors middleweight champion coming in here, fighting out of Greece. We seen him in there actually in his last fight, picking up the Cage Warriors title himself. A good win, a surprising win, obviously. Or no, it was the welterweight title, excuse me, against O'Neill Brown. O'Neill Brown very favored going into that match, but Johnny Backer kind of caught him, put him out early, and I think it just proves in the pudding with a couple of his previous performances as well. He has big power, and if he lands, you're going to be in big trouble here. So this guy is going to be definitely one to watch in the bracket as well with the power that he does possess. What do you make of his chances, Theo?
He does have big power, and I think that's the main thing that you're going to take away from watching a lot of tape on this guy is that he can always finish the fight on the feet. He's a Greek national Muay Thai champion, WKF kickboxing world champion. He is a bit stiff in my opinion from what I've seen on him, which might kind of leave him open for defense on the feet, but he's effective with his own striking. He's live by the sword, die by the sword. He's more than comfortable to stay in the pocket with you because he believes his exchanges are going to be the ones that put you down rather than vice versa. And he's going to land more quality shots as well. He has a long history of being a great shot selector more than anything. So I'm excited to see this guy compete. He is a little bit behind in the grappling as well, which, given the last couple of guys we were talking about, it might be tough for him, especially early on in this tournament if he doesn't get the right
Yeah, like a
matchups.
guy who normally fights at welterweight too. I know I got mixed up when I
Right.
said what championship he won. It's like, you're going to be coming in against those bigger guys as well and those bigger wrestlers too. And you would imagine a guy that we talked about there, Ryan Loder, who's coming in as an NCAA double A Division One guy who's used to probably cutting massive amount of weights and coming in relatively big into the cage as well. It'd be interesting to see how he get on with a guy like Bakar. But maybe Bakar's had the time to put on some weight now. I guess maybe from his last fight, it'd be very interesting. Do you think Bakar has a chance in the bracket if certain things go his way?
I do. I'm never gonna doubt a guy who is as how do I want it? He's so well developed in the striking that when you have one thing like that that is so over everyone else, I can never count you out. I mean,
Yeah.
look at Alex Pereira. This is a guy who was with all due respect, he's an amateur in jiu-jitsu, or at least that was at the beginning of his UFC run, has developed a little bit now in the later goings. But when you have a guy who has that one tool that people can fall victim to, if you give him the right matchmaking, he can do well. So again, it's going to depend a lot on the first couple of matchups he gets in the TUF house, but I think he does have the tools to go far, no doubt. Obviously, the glaring weakness is there, but all these guys have glaring weaknesses. So it's really just going to depend on who they give him.
Yes, indeed, it will. Moving on into the bracket, Tom Teociaris fighting out of Toronto, Ontario. Coming in here off the back of 3 wins in a row. Probably the most patchiest record, if we're being honest, coming into the TUF household with a record of 9-5. But a couple of decent wins in there. But you don't fancy him too much and his chances with the rest of the guys in this bracket, Theo, do you?
No, and especially if you're a wrestler by nature and you've lacked an ability to use it effectively against lower level competition, it's really going to be hard for me to give my vote to you. Especially when you top onto that he doesn't look very developed on the feet at all either. 9-5. His 5 losses are to people with winning records as well, or excuse me, those 5 losses are people with losing records. So it's just hard to know what you're going to get out of this guy. I trust the UFC saw something in him that I didn't. so that's why they picked him for this. But I do not see this individual going far at all.
Yep, and fair assessment. But you know what? We've had some guys that have gone in there with low levels of expectation that have done quite well as well. And I guess when you don't have that level of expectation on your back, perhaps obviously he's going to go in there. He's not going in there thinking he's going to lose. But when he matches up with the rest of the guys, you would think that he would be not really a big favorite coming into the tournament. Last but not least, of course, in the middleweight division, from West Belfast, 4-1, Paddy McCorry team, FAI, up in Belfast. I'm a massive fan of Paddy McCorry. I love this guy. Until he got this opportunity, I was saying he was a shoe-in to become a middleweight champion within Cage Warriors. At 4-1, only defeat the former Cage Warriors champion, James Webb. Explosive striking. We did see, you look at the tenacity and the heart that he has in his last fight, where he took out a really good guy in Samir Kaddi with a guillotine choke. He went all Dustin Poirier in that one, Theo. He didn't give up on the gilly, and it ended up getting him the win in round 3 there. But, two major things that you would look at Paddy McCorry coming in here is that lack of experience, only at 4-1. And the fact that Samir Kaddi was able to take him down repeatedly in that fight. Now look at McCorry will be working on that. He is dangerous off his back as well, but got lots of heavy grapplers coming in here. And how do you see Paddy McCorry kind of matching up with some of the rest of the bracket in the middleweight division?
Yeah, well, you said it there. His two biggest weaknesses are he lacks the experience that a lot of these guys have, and he also lacks a takedown defense. Now, given everything that we've talked about on this show, those are the two easiest things to fix. Obviously, experience is going to come naturally as you progress throughout your career, but takedown defense, it seems like it's the one thing that even great strikers who aren't necessarily well-rounded grapplers can figure out how to stuff takedowns. This is a guy who, Paddy's only 26, correct? Like he's not going to have that developed, rounded out game just yet, and that's fine. Takedown defense is something that you're going to pick up, tools and tricks of the trade along the way. So that's something that I think that honestly, even in this tournament, in this competition, he could have improved on massively. So when you have that combined with his killer instinct, great finishing ability, he's explosive on the feet, can knock you out, can submit you. He's long, he's deceptively powerful. I think Paddy McCorry he's a top contender for this tournament.
I think so too.
I honestly think that he could win this middleweight section given the rest of the guys we talked about earlier. Ian, what do you think?
Yeah, I think he has a rock solid mentality, and obviously you need some things to go your way. But I've been massively impressed. I've been following Paddy for quite some time now, and he's rise up through the middleweight ranks. And obviously fought a couple of times on Cage Conflict, an Irish domestic show, and also on Cage Warriors as well on the lead up here. Like only lost to James Webb, almost knocked James Webb out with a flying knee. Lost a unanimous decision, but gave James Webb absolute fits in that fight. And James Webb coming in there with a mass amount of experience, and it just shows the level of confidence that Paddy has in himself and his abilities to even take that fight. I believe it was on short notice as well, but we saw a huge flying knee knockout from against Angus Hewitt, and obviously I was massively impressed of that Samir Kaddi. Samir Kaddi is a legit contender coming up in the middleweight division, and Cage Warriors too, and Paddy McCorry took him out. So I'm very excited to see how Paddy does in this, as I am with Omran and Nathan Fletcher and Bakar as well. All of the Cage Warriors alumni is coming in here as well. Overall, obviously you're giving Paddy a chance in the middleweight bracket. When you look at all the fighters there, Theo, who's your one? Who's the one that you pick out?
I do believe Paddy is the guy who is going to come out of the middleweight tournament. However, I don't want to just be the guy who's saying that on an Irish MMA media outlet. So
go full shield, because that's what I'm going to do. I'm calling for Paddy.
All right, well, McCorry. if you're going with Paddy, then I'll say Omran Chaaban. Then I think those two guys, they're gonna meet right there.
That's all I want out of this. Paddy and Omran in the final of the Ultimate Fighter. Oh my God, Andy Stevenson would lose his shit if that fight went down. Loves that Irish versus Irish kind of team fight as well. But you know what? Going through all these fighters now, looking into them, as me, my interest has kind of got a little bit higher as well. And obviously, me and Tia are going to commit to come on after every episode of the Ultimate Fighter this year, break it down. Let's hope that we get some good runs from all the Cage Warriors alumni, keep the interest in the season. We'll be coming on right after the Ultimate Fighter finales to break down what has happened on each episode. Obviously, episode 1, we'll break down the teams. We'll see who's the strongest teams and who has the best chances from there. Maybe our opinions will change. We'll get to see a fight tomorrow night or tonight as well. And we'll be back straight on after to break it down. It's been good fun, Theo. I always have fun recording these podcasts. Good to break down The Ultimate Fighter, add a little bit of extra interest into a series that the candle is slowly burning out on. But hopefully with Omran in there, with Paddy in there, with Nathan and Yanni Bakar, we can kind of buy into this season and look forward to it. No spoilers, please. I know I'd say there is some information out there. I know nothing. I honestly know nothing going into this, and I want to keep it that way as well. I've been warning the lads behind the scenes. I know Andy does a little bit of digging here and there. It's like, don't tell me. I want to be watching these fights blind, and I'm very excited to see the overall results of both the featherweight division and obviously the middleweight division as well. For Theo Lander, I'm Ian O'Neill. We'll be back to review episode 1 a little bit later on tonight as you're listening to this. Hope you enjoyed. We'll catch you soon.